Hey everybody, welcome to the second part of the Mangrove Jack's hard seltzer kit. This is the part where I talk about fermentation, degassing, and then kegging, and the final product. I will be doing a review of the actual seltzer just after this first part where I'll describe how I did the degassing and how I carbonated the seltzer kit. And I'll put a link right up here to the making of it. You'll be able to see that, and we'll walk you through these steps. So the first thing I did is, by following the directions, it was about 7 or 8 days when I noticed that fermentation had stopped or slowed. The instructions suggest to make sure that there's no fermentation going on after about 7 days, and to check about 2 days in between. So I did a gravity sample. First of all, the original gravity was 1030, and it finished off with a specific gravity of 0.999. So dry. It was dry. I was happy with that. That's a final ABV of just slightly over 4%. So that's exactly what the kit had promised, approximately 4% ABV. The next stage was to add flavor, and so the raspberry flavor packet that came with this, you add that, and it suggests to stir thoroughly. What I decided to do is kind of like in beer making, it's possible to do a secondary fermentation. So I racked off the seltzer into a separate bucket, a second bucket, and I degassed it as well as adding the flavor packet. For kegging, so stage 3 is all bottling, but there's stage 4 if you're going to keg, and there's difference there. So I've decided to keg because I use kegs with my setup. And there's 2 packages of fining agents that you add to it to clarify the seltzer. Step 11, it gets you to put the fining agent, and then you need to degas it vigorously. And to do that, what I use for aerating beer before pitching the yeast, I use a drill and this broken stir paddle. So I was actually at a home brew shop, and I was handling one of these, and I flexed it a little bit too much, and it broke. And so I ended up buying it anyway, broken and all, and it's perfect. It's serendipity at the best, because it fits perfectly into this drill, and you can aerate the beer before pitching the yeast. It does a great job, and you can speed it up a bit. Anyway, I used this same method to degas the seltzer. So I put it on high, and then it really, really vigorously degasses. This is perfect. I suppose I could use this for wine making as well when it's the degassing step. So I'd recommend something like this. Otherwise, you can do it by hand. It would work. It just take longer, and it's a bit more tiring. Yes, after 3 days, after you add the finings, it says that it's supposed to be perfectly clear before racking it into the keg. I wasn't convinced it was totally clear. It was just a slightly bit cloudy towards the bottom, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches, and the rest of it looked like it was quite clear, which was fine, because in the end, the product is crystal clear, and you'll see that when I do the tasting. So let's talk about kegging. I'm going to show you my kegging process and my setup, and I realize not all home brewers would have all this stuff, but it's helped me along the way with beer making primarily, and then this with the seltzer. So we'll talk about kegging in a minute. All right, so here's one of my Corny kegs. This is a ball lock keg. It's a standard 19-liter keg that I bought used. I use this for my beer making, but it was perfect for the seltzer because I can serve it on a draft tap. But here's what I did. the instructions suggest to carbonate the seltzer kit for 5 to 7 days. And that's if you set the pressure at 15 to 20 psi. My preference is to do that a little bit quicker. I generally carbonate beer by setting a regulator to 30 psi and leave it for 48 hours. I get really good results with beer, especially with my kegerator setup. It pours a good draft of beer. It's not too carbonated, it's not too light. 48 hours at 30 psi generally works for me and my preference for beer. But for the seltzer, I wanted something a bit more spritzy. Yes, I could leave it for longer at 30 psi and just let it trickle, dissolve the CO2 to dissolve into the seltzer. But I had just received a brand new product that I bought on Amazon, and it's a carbonation lid that I'm able to hook up with my CO2. So if you can see here, this lid is not the lid that came with the keg. It's an extra lid, and it has a gas post right here. And that allows you to force carbonate your product in just hours. So I can actually carbonate a beer in 2.5 hours at 30 psi after the beer is cold and has been in the fridge for a little bit. 2.5 hours, and I can carbonate, no problem. It's great. I'll put a link to Amazon. I'm not trying to sell the product. I'm not getting anything for describing this. I'm just saying it's something that's available. So the two methods that you can use are, you can hook up your gas supply directly to the keg and just leave it. That's the standard gas post connection. I do 48 hours at 30 psi, or instead you can connect it to this particular type of lid, and it carbonates through a carb stone. So I'll show you that. Okay, so here's the top of the keg, and I'll take off this carbonation lid and show you what it looks like inside. So this keg is empty, and it's been cleaned, but always check to make sure that there's no pressure left on the keg. Otherwise, you end up damaging the lid. Here's what this looks like. Inside is a silicone line, and it's got a carb stone attached to it. So this carb stone works for CO2, and it goes into the lid at the top, and that's connected to this gas post here. So this just goes down into the liquid, and it carbonates. And then you hook it up right to here. And that's connected, and you set your regulator to 30 psi, turn on the gas after the liquid is cold, and you're good to go. Another thing I like to do with my beer, and in this case with the seltzer, is use a floating dip tube. So I actually picked up a half dozen of these from a homebrew supply online, and this floating dip tube floats near the surface of the beer. It's drawing in from the top, and as it goes down through the keg, it sinks, and it's following the clearest beer possible rather than using the drawing tube from the bottom. And so to install this, all you have to do is replace your beer draw tube with this one that looks like it's about the same size as a gas line, and you replace the beer out tube with this, and then you insert the silicone hose, and it's all set. So I'll show you what I do. I've got my ratchet. It's a 11/16, sorry, ratchet deep socket, and can take off It'd help if I had it the right way. Okay, there we go. Okay, take off this gas, or sorry, the beer outpost. That's with the poppet inside of it. And you remove the beer line. So it's the long piece of steel. You remove that, and then you replace it with the floating dip tube line. So you take off this from the silicone, you put this in here, and put back on the post. Just like that, and then you tighten up with the ratchet. Meanwhile, inside, what you'd have to do is drop down the ball, the line, and then carefully insert this line, the silicone line, onto that small post. That replaces the tube that draws from the bottom of the product and ensures that you get the clearest beer or seltzer possible. All right, we're back. We're going to do a tasting of the seltzer, and I'll give some sort of a review of what I think of it. I've had this before, but I wanted to make sure that it tasted okay just before I do a review. I haven't had it that much, so it's probably been about a week since I had a glass of it, and I've only had a couple before that. So anyway, I have this type of glass. It has a nucleated bottom to it. I don't know if you can see that, but the tiny perforations on this glass keep the beverage kind of spritzy. So I'll use this. I just rinsed it out. And we'll take a look. So I have it on a picnic tap because right now my other two taps on my kegerator are being used for beer. So we'll fill it up. Picnic tap. I've got the carbonation set to about 12 psi. There we go. Set that down. Put this away. Okay. So, as you can see, the seltzer is crystal clear. It's clear enough you could probably see my fingerprints on the glass there. You can see behind it. It has a bit of a white cap foam head. It does dissipate fairly quickly, but you can see the carbon dioxide bubbles coming up. That's helped by the nucleated bottom, as I mentioned before. But that foam head will dissipate over time and it settles out. So let's take, yeah, that's really clear. And I'd say that that's probably helped along with the fact that I'm using the floating dip tube in this. So it's drawing as clear of a product as possible. And as I mentioned, I carbonated this for, I think it was 3 hours at 30 psi, and I used that carb stone lid before switching it off to carbonate beer in the meantime. So I'll give a bit of an aroma here. It smells like raspberries. It's kind of faint though. It's definitely raspberry essence. There's no doubt there. Otherwise, it has a little bit of a sulfur aroma to it. And while this seltzer kit was fermenting, the area where it's fermenting, and it had a very strong sulfur smell, like almost the whole time. It must be the type of yeast used. So it's definitely not beer yeast that they're using. It was like the type of yeast you'd use with a lager kit, except a little bit more present, a little bit more harsh, I'd say. But this has a faint smell of that. Anyway, on to a tasting. There's nothing like tasting it to get an impression, but it's definitely well carbonated. It tastes like raspberries, but you can definitely tell it's not real raspberries. It's raspberry-like. I would say that it's not too powerful for raspberries, but it's kind of that raspberry aspartame type flavor. if that makes any sense. It's like if there is such a thing as a raspberry soda, or just like raspberry carbonated water, it would taste just like that. It's probably the same type of flavor chemical product that's used for a lot of things. But anyway, it's not unpleasant at all. It's refreshing. I call this a sleeper type drink because you can't even tell there's alcohol in it. There is. It's 4%, and I think that if you didn't know any better, if you didn't know that there was alcohol in this, you might get into it. You might have a surprise. I don't know. Anyway, it's quite pleasant. Other people that have tried this, they like it, but it's not their favorite beverage. It's unique. Now, I'd never had a seltzer before. I'd never tried one. I'd never bought like the White Claw or any of those things. So this was a first for me. I like it. Would I buy another one? Maybe. I wouldn't rush out to buy another kit. I know that the Mangrove Jacks kits, there's like the lemon lime, and then there's a pineapple one. I think if I was going to try another kit, I'd get lemon lime just to see what that's like. Otherwise, I think this is a reasonable first kit, trying raspberry. That's what was recommended to me by my home brew shop, and I'm not disappointed by this. I think it's a good drink to have maybe in the summertime. It's refreshing. It probably has virtually no calories in it. It'd be calories from the alcohol only, and at that, it's fairly low alcohol. So would I recommend it? Yes, I would. Would I rush out and buy another kit? Probably not. I may just wait till next summer or spring to do another version of this, probably the lemon lime. But I would recommend this. I think it's a good kit. It's very easy to make. The steps included in the kit are easy to follow, and I think it would be hard to mess up this kit. The only thing is it was highly recommended to me to keg versus bottle the product, and I think that you're going to get a clearer product if you're kegging it, and certainly you can control the amount of carbonation when you're force carbonating it, unlike bottle conditioning where you're subject to the amount of sugars left in it for secondary fermentation or bottle conditioning. So yes, get this kit. If you're kegging, all the better. Otherwise, I'm not sure how it would turn out bottling it, but highly recommend this. Thank you for watching, and consider subscribing or even liking this video if you're happy with the content. Anyway, thank you very much.